Now.
Okay, thank you, Ronan, and welcome everybody to what has become an annual event. And certainly, I'm always assured of seeing Peter at least once a year at this event. So thank you very much, Peter, for your continuing support. We're also joined by Steve Marr. So just quick introductions and slightly less conventional introductions. I'm going to give a very personal introduction to. For me, Peter is the CEO of the Construction Products Association, and with that role comes many responsibilities and many committees that he sits on, too many perhaps to name, but all relevant and pertinent to this conversation. And one bit to be clear about is certainly one of the instigators of CCPI. The other side, which I've always found very important and very handy, is Peter is a qualified architect practicing for many, many years in the construction industry. And it's that practicality that I always find means that he can actually connect to exactly the topics we're talking about. So welcome to Peter. And also, I'd like to welcome Steve for the first time to this forum. Steve Marr is the interim Chief Operating Officer for CCPI. He works very closely with Amanda Long, and he's seconded from SIG and has worked for many, many years. I think, well, nearly actually as long as Peter has been an architect, is that for 34 years in construction distribution. And what I'd like to say as a personal note from working with Steve, again, the advantage of somebody that is very practical and has been very helpful in the process of CCPI. So welcome to you both, and welcome again to visitors. So basically at the moment, the heading here is the changing landscape of the construction industry. And one of the biggest things that's happened in recent times, and certainly since our last get together, is the Building Safety Act. And one of the questions I'm going to start with, and I'll perhaps ask Peter first, is Peter, just in terms of what you feel and what you've seen are the practical implications now of the Building Safety Act on architects with their new responsibilities.
Nigel, thank you, and thanks for asking me back. So obviously I behaved myself last time, which is always good to know. I think the way I would characterize this is that we've spent a long time in the preparation of the changes, and those changes are now upon us. So we've had a lot of, and it's a bit like for many people, I'm sure, was this ever going to happen? And it's something that's quite theoretical, but actually now it's starting to impact on the industry. So the Act is quite a complicated, far-reaching change for the whole construction industry. And a point I think I've made quite a few times is that initially I think many people thought this was just about high-rise, high-risk residential. It isn't. It's a change to the process. Another key point I'd make initially, Nigel, is that as yet, none of the regulations have changed. There's a lot of people behaving as if we've had a huge change to the regulations. We haven't. We've had a huge change to the process of how the regulations actually work, and most importantly, the verification that is needed. Now, to answer your question specifically, how is this affecting architects? It's affecting them quite considerably, because they now have a duty if they are on a contract as the appointed principal designer. And again, the point I make to people many times is that this should not be difficult to understand, because we've had the CDM regs since 2015. Many designers will have operated as a principal designer under CDM, and the new role is an extension of that. The principles, the core principles are exactly the same. And so if you expand those, then you understand what the role is. I think the challenge, though, is that it requires people to be much more clear about what they are designing and what they're asking the supply chain and the contractors to do. And they carry responsibility. So you can't You can't just say, well, I've just done my bit and that's it. You've got to be very clear, and that in turn is causing the whole industry to reconsider what they are actually providing, what they're doing, and of course that is a direct link into the code for construction product information. But I think what I would say in this initial point is that with its early days, the regulator is learning just as much as industry is learning. We still do not have, most importantly, all of the product regulations. We certainly have got a number of key issues that have yet to be resolved. I know the department's working on that, but as many of you will know, we keep getting the answer that they are working on it, but they can't tell us what the answers are yet, which is immensely frustrating for all of us. And of course, the election has caused a further delay, and I don't anticipate we will get government back up and running until mid-autumn. And so therefore that's a challenge for all of us to try and progress in the meantime, and progress we will. So I think probably, Nigel, I should stop there. Otherwise, I could just take up the whole hour.
No, that's fine. Thank you. And obviously, so a key point there is we're all waiting for secondary legislation. One of the practical points so a lot of the people that will be on the call will be working for manufacturers and trade associations, etc. And one of the practical things that I've been finding is we're getting some weird and wonderful questions now from architects that perhaps feel that they've now got a responsibility, an extra responsibility. And it usually revolves around proof or evidence of where you got your information from that you're providing. Now, of course, we're going to come on to Steve with some CCPI questions. It's not always just about what is the products. I've shared with a number of people that we actually have people asking us as to prove the software that we do our tapered insulation design. It's going to some extremes. Now, the guidance I've given to many staff is to basically be aware that you may get some questions that you didn't used to get, and it could be because of this that's coming through. So yeah, okay. So thank you for that. It's a good opener, and obviously it's a bit that's on a lot of people's minds at the minute. Now I'm going to move on to a sort of the CCPI area, and Steve, it's a good opportunity for you to update us in terms of we're more than a year in now. Is what the score is on the doors? Where are we? How's it progressing?
Thanks very much, Nigel. It's progressing at a pace. As you will no doubt be aware of, as being a major supporter of it yourself, we're now working with well over 100 different suppliers who are all at very different stages in the process. You say a year now, it's been slightly longer. I think February we finally got ourselves off the ground last year. So, and if you recall, some of you on the call were with Dame Judith and some of my colleagues at an event in September to celebrate being the first to get your assessment marks, which was superb. So as I say, now well over 100 suppliers are working with many thousands of products carrying an assessment mark, and we've got a strong pipeline of suppliers working with us through that particular process now in many different sectors. It's good to see that with you guys on the call and the roofing sector generally have been very strong adopters and supporters of the code, which is great to see. But we're also now extending into suppliers in the in different worlds, in the electrical world, heavy side, as well as roofing insulation and so on. So yeah, windows, doors, yeah, very, very new sectors even for myself with my years of experience in this sector, which is very, very interesting. And of course, Nigel, we've got the other two branches of the code, which are particularly relevant to some of the guys on the call here. The supporters code particularly is picking up a good pace at the moment with more and more of the tier one contractors and major house builders adopting the code, and different ones of them asking their strategic supply chain to progress through the registration and assessment process at a quicker pace than even we'd asked them to pledge within 12 months for a couple of those, which is again driving some more suppliers to us to have to do that. And we have hopefully, if we can get their PR teams to sign it all off, some good announcements of some more major contractors to join that particular club coming out in the next few days and weeks, which is superb. And we're also now just starting from the merchants and distributor perspective with a number of those early adopters being able to upload their leadership and culture surveys parts, which is, as you all know, a core part of the CCPI process. So from myself, experience at SIG, we've just got to the threshold of the 400 people I need to get to do that survey, which was no mean feat of getting that. But it's a long process for us in that world to satisfy. And coincidentally, a combination of the supporters and the merchant piece, we are seeing specifications come through with CCPI as a requirement for projects. And that's not just CCPI assessment marks for products, but also for the whole supply chain, as in merchants and distributors as well.
So going well, but such a long way to go, guys. You know, so the more we can encourage adoption, the better, really, and the much wider spread across the sectors would be also great to see.
Okay, thank you. Your sound just dropped out at the end there. So one of the points that is raised, and I've often said that perhaps the most difficult part of the CCPI compliance is the competence piece. And obviously we'll have, again, lots of manufacturers have lots of sales staff that are in their employ. And one of the key areas is what we're doing to help indicate what competence, say, a technical salesperson has. Now, I know that, Peter, you've been with CPA working on this. So if I start with you on that, and then I'll come to Steve.
Yeah, sure, Nigel. So we as many will know on the call, we've been part of the competence steering group range of work that's been going on steadily. So we've currently got working groups 1 through to 12, and that work is progressing and developing quite nicely. Working group 2 has over the last 18 months increased significantly, and I think there's a challenge there in just trying to get everybody within all those groups organised and move forward. Specifically in terms of products, though, Working Group 12 is now taking the framework that we developed and moving that forward towards British Standard. I hope by the time we get to this point next year, that British Standard will almost be ready for publication. So that's part of the 8670 series, following on from the standards for the duty holders. And I'm hopeful that will then give us a formal approach to how competence frameworks are generated. It's not leading everybody directly into a solution, but what it does do, it gives us a bedrock of a foundation to take that forward. And I'm sure in parallel to that, some of the other work that we're doing, particularly emanating out of the white paper that we issued last year, will get us to a much better joined up approach across industry that we can all use in the competency arena.
Thank you. And Steve, obviously, for those of us who've gone through the process, then we're familiar that at the minute there is a in-between stage for competence and how that's, Rule 11 is being measured until we get to what Peter's just been talking about. How's that working? Oh, we can't hear you. Oh.
Apologies, my headphones there keep going on to mute. I think it's going to be quite difficult, Nigel, to have a one-size-fits-all in this particular arena. And we've seen some very comprehensive matrices, shall we say, and some less comprehensive. The important part is to have something and to start the process of documenting it so that we've got something to work with. And then the really great work that the working groups are doing will come in and bolster that and give hopefully some more accuracy and development going forward. But what we've seen so far, generally very good as a starting point. But we're expecting to see, as the whole CCPI process revolves over the 2-year cycle, significant improvements in this particular sector, because we know it's a high priority. But just having something in the first instance
it's considerably better than I think most people might currently have.
Okay. And another one for you, Stephen, is has there been any major or significant learnings since we got going with CCPI in full? Any major things in that time that you've learned that or tweaked or changed to the advantage of everybody?
I think it's a steep learning curve for all of our assessors, particularly who are upskilling, and I notice we've got at least one on this call here today, which is superb. I think probably the single standout thing, if I was to pick one, is the absolute correlation between a really good outcome in the first leadership and culture part of the survey, which is a part that the regulator at the OPSS does really like, because in their view, it gives a level of consistency and certainty of general accuracy going forward. But the correlation between a good output from that survey and then everything else that gets submitted, from the product information management systems through to the corroborating evidence for product information itself, is very, very clear that the individuals concerned in an organisation with such a strong score absolutely believe in the quality of the product information they're providing, their part to play in whichever part of the process they're touching in relation to how that product information gets syndicated out, isn't a tick box exercise. That it's part of their role, and it's an important part of their role. And we've had a handful of suppliers that haven't progressed past that stage yet, and it's a clear gateway for the very reason that if it's not a strong result at that stage, then there is a question mark over how accurate the rest of the information would be. But that has been as much as we thought it would be a strong correlation, Nigel, it's been exceptionally strong in that respect.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to widen it a bit more to sort of industry issues. And one of my questions again to Peter now is over-specifying to cover tolerance and variability here to stay?
Oh, there's a good question. Well, I'd say in some parts of the world it never left, Nigel. This is quite a challenging question. So really, to me, it's how confident are you that you're in every respect of performance, your product, your design, your workmanship will carry you across the threshold of the performance level that you want. And I specifically choose those words. This isn't necessarily about just getting over the building regs threshold. Building regs are a minimum required standard. And so what I'm hoping, and what we see in good practice areas, I've always seen that in good practice areas of construction around the world, that the very best buildings exceed the performance on all levels, and that shows. And the problem that construction has is, with the greatest respect to everybody, it's not an exact science. When you end up with that completed, whatever it is, there are lots and lots of things that could have gone slightly wrong along the way. And so how confident are you at the end of the day when it's being handed over? How confident are you that all of those various myriad of things are actually doing the right job, doing the job that they were intended to do? How many things can you vouch for are really spot on? Now, therefore, then it quickly gets us into a conversation about tolerance and production accuracy all the way through. It gets us into a conversation about how good were all the operatives on that long journey, and did they actually follow the manufacturer's instructions? Did they do everything in accordance with the specification? So there are lots of twists and turns in that conversation. All I think I would say is that in a world where construction is expected to deliver performance, and that's not just structure and safety, the Act talks about performance in its top line requirement. So we have an Act of Parliament which says it is expected that buildings will perform. And so that includes thermal, it includes accessibility, it includes all the other key characteristics that are defined within the functional requirements of the building regulations. So for me, it's a case of everybody really thinking long and hard about how that is achieved, and making sure that they do. And of course, this comes back in terms of, yes, those liabilities are real and will start to bite with a regulator that has greater powers of surveillance and sanction. It shouldn't be all like that. It's about carrot and stick. And I think the important thing for us is that we can move the industry to an industry which is proud of the buildings that it produces and is confident that those buildings perform in all levels.
Yeah, and obviously, we've discussed this many times, so I knew it was a one that you would enjoy. I mean, obviously, I would point out that the standard is the standard, is that it's often referred as the minimum, but you're indicating that, but you have to allow variability for whether it be workmanship, etc. And that leads in nicely to one, and I'll be Ronan's friend for a little longer, is the fact that when I come to ask you, is get it right first time and use it by using a competent contractor finally found its audience?
Well, yes, I think we need all of those kind of mechanisms to ensure that we do actually do that. I mean, I've got to say, for far too long, over the last 20 or 30 years, as far as I'm concerned, the focus has been on cheapest and fastest. And if cheapest and fastest is at the expense of of achieving the result that we are meant to achieve, then I think we're in problems. And I think that we've seen that a spiraling position of decreasing standards, decreasing quality, and of course previously nobody has really been checking. And there has been very precious little surveillance and precious little feedback until something catastrophic goes wrong that we all regret and we don't want to see. But unfortunately, that's where we've got into, and we have got to reverse that and get out of it. And now we have some very clear legislation which requires everybody to do just that. Now, there's a question mark over how much do you exceed any particular level? And that centers to me around tolerance and understanding your tolerances, and that's right the way through. And for me, that's about coming back to needing competent people at every stage in the process. If you've got a competent team, a confident team, then they can do things that are very precise and get you to a defined output. So if you're good at that, you don't need to exceed any particular level by too much. But I think it's important that we do look at it from that point of view.
And certainly I hear that there's a number of people on the call be thinking is that competence is on both sides in terms of supplier and specification, that we often are vying with ignorant questions, dare I say.
Could I jump in just to say it's competence by everybody? So that is not just us in the supply chain, that's clients being competent in asking for things and defining things that are within bounds. It's regulators understanding their role as a regulator and understanding what they can ask for and what they can't ask for. And it's all elements of the supply chain and all elements of government. And the important thing for me is that I would like to have a pretty open and honest conversation about it requires all of the people in the whole arena to have good standards and good competence.
Yeah, no, and one would expect that perhaps on, I think, the 4th of September, we might actually get a bit more insight about the report on Grenfell and everybody's responsibility in their competence.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so well, just one quick bit, just coming back to competence and something that I think I'm right in saying that you elaborated on in the building regulation regulators conference was the definition of competence, because a lot of people think that you need to go and get the degree or whatever. And as one of my old bosses always used to say, he's read the book, but he can't fly the plane. Do you want to expand on that?
Well, I think we have a number of reports that the industry has produced recently. Sort of setting the bar, raising the bar, and in those we've been quite clear on taking the definition of competence forwards, Nigel. And I think if anybody's got any doubt over any of that, then please read those reports. A lot of real hard work went into producing them, and they give you the real essence of how this should work. And that in turn was based upon internationally agreed definitions. So I think it should be pretty straightforward for everybody. I think the important thing for maybe the takeaway on this point is the principle is about having the knowledge, the skills, the aptitude, and the attitude is crucial in that. Your point about reading the book but can't fly the plane, I think that's spot on. You have people who've done all the theory, but they need to do the practice, and then they need to put that practice into proper action, and that's a challenge, I think. So yeah, that's the direction of travel. Sorry about the noise in the background.
It's all right. And it's experiences that, and in the end, is the word experience is the key thing often that's missed in that, because there's lots of people out there that have lots of knowledge and experience, and so that was the point that I think was made. Okay, so I'm going to come back to Steve on CCPI now. Again, it was a challenge that I made to the building regulation conference audience, but it was probably more aimed at the manufacturers. I keep coming across manufacturers when I ask them with my Bauder hat on, what are you doing about applying to CCPI? And often the answer I'm getting is, oh, we're following the 11 rules.
Yeah, I was trying to come up with a better analogy than your flying the plane piece there, Nigel. I don't know if there's a better one, but very same scenario there. You can, if you're walking the walk, you're talking the talk, but you can't read the course guidelines for your A levels and claim you've got an A level. And similar in this world, if you're you can't read for example, the ISO 9001 guidelines and claim to everybody that you've got ISO 9001. Back to my previous answer on the leadership and culture piece, that has such a massive bearing on the company's overall performance under the code for construction products information, that not going through the process is not going to get you to where you need to get to and improve building safety generally. It absolutely has to be tested, tried, and everybody in your organisation has to buy in to why it's there. And as I say, there's a strong correlation where they do that. But for anybody to be claiming they're following a set of rules when they clearly can't be. I mean, if I roll back the clock 7 years, I'm sure that was the thought process then to a number of companies involved, and unfortunate things happened. I'd be very disappointed if I was to come across that response, to say the least, and would respond quite tersely, I think, Nigel. But yeah, it'd be interesting who's responding to that to you in that fashion.
Well, and it's also, I mean, for all of those of the manufacturers on the call that have gone through the process, then you totally get there's the fact that the 11 rules is the beginning. You've mentioned the key, very important bits of the pre-work, as it were, but and then also just the changes that are needed, even though you knew that you had confidence in the 11 rules, but there's all the tweaks and the amendments. So it's so much further in the journey. So yeah,
as you say, it's a journey, and we're not here to make everyone's life hard work. We're here to hopefully start the journey of improving, as I say, building safety in relation to products information considerably over time. It isn't just going to hit all in one go, and we're working with all suppliers to generally improve the way in which they take their products information to market. So I hope it's not onerous. It is enlightening to a lot of suppliers, absolutely. And it is absolutely challenging. but it is a robust process. And I think hopefully the feedback we've had so far is that the people that have been through it and got their assessment mark feel it's been absolutely worthwhile. And the sector seems to be recognising that.
Yeah. So just picking up again the topic we were talking about, Peter, I'm going to ask you, just following on what we were just talking about before. I think a lot of us feel that the insurers are basically filling the gap that is missing from regulation standards, et cetera. And I just wondered what your thoughts and comments were on that.
Yeah, interesting, Nigel. So I'm sure that there isn't a company on the call who hasn't had some difficulty with insurance, be it indemnity or trade credit or one of the various things that the industry uses. Now, the problem we've got is that the insurance industry writes its own rules. It is a risk-based industry, and it goes forward with its assessment of risk and therefore offers cover accordingly. And I think it has seen the various things that have gone on within construction as being increasing risk. And also the insurance industry covers other sectors, so they don't necessarily have to do business with the construction industry at all. So we find ourselves quite marginalised by all of those issues. And so what we've been trying to do through CPA and through the CLC is to engage more closely with all the various parts of the insurance industry, because like construction, it's not one entity. It has a lot of different subcomponents, if you like, and understand what their issues are. And by having a more detailed conversation, by getting them in to understand the kind of issues that we deal with, by trying to also, if you like, bust the myths that have been developed, by using the correct language that is accurate, by signposting strongly the CCPI, all of those things are now starting to build a conversation between construction and insurance, which I believe is going to help. It's going to help in terms of making sure that insurers understand better the challenges that everybody faces in the supply chain and in construction generally. And in doing that, they will offer better terms. So that's our goal. And it is starting to work. And we've had a number of construction insurance events. We've got another one happening at the end of the year. And that is building confidence on both sides that we can start to really address the situation. But I agree with you, insurance does kind of fill the gap where there is uncertainty and challenge, then insurance comes into play. And that actually can be a good thing, but a lot of the time people see it as really challenging, increased costs, less cover. How the dickens do we move forward? We are moving forward, but it will take a bit of time for this to really impact on the bigger stage, I think.
Okay. Well, I will come back to progress that with some specific examples, which most people on the call will know where I'm going next. But Steve, just to the good point made there is that I'm always trying to think of where do I think that CCPI could be lobbied next. So you've obviously gone to the clear places. It was distribution. You've been approaching the main contractors. We've one of the areas that I think would be the insurers. So is there any work being done there?
A good point there. Not directly, at least not that I'm involved in, Nigel, but as Peter's already assigned there, we've had many discussions with insurers around how CCPI assessment could actually potentially be a boon or make getting insurance easier or cheaper. So it's one of the many things that are on our long list of activities to pick up, because we do see an avenue there where it's another de-risking scenario. So it's absolutely an avenue to pursue there with the insurers as we develop and get a much wider portfolio available in the market.
Well, we've gone for what, nearly 37 minutes, and I haven't mentioned the four-letter word beginning with F. And I'm just about to, so it hasn't got an expletive at the end of it. It's so where, just to continue, an example, Peter, was fire, just in case you were worried there. And the one of the areas that many people on the call are finding it, it's certainly for the technical teams, it takes an inordinate amount of our time still. Peter, how many years ago was it that we sort of like got in the room with the regulator and chatted through? That was some years ago now, and not a lot has changed from their side. And so there's a good example of the insurers actually filling that space. And I suppose it's relevant to what we're talking about, over specification and tolerance, whereas with fire, it seems to be an area where there is a specific requirement and then the insurers have their own rules. And it's absolutely confusing the poor old specifier who doesn't know sometimes which is which. You often have people coming on telling you something is a fact that you know is not actually the case. That is a good example of what I was talking about, of insurers filling the space. Now, of course, I know that you come across the whole issue of fire as well. So I'm just interested to hear so what's been happening from your side in that world recently.
Well, Nigel, I absolutely agree with you. And in fact, actually, for as long as I can remember, for long as I started practice, fire has been a complicated and confusing arena. And a real challenge, as you say, because people will tell you black is white and white is black in some quarters. I think we do have some very grown-up input from insurers, and in particular, I would sort of look at LPS and FM Global as they were. I think that has helped in terms of them doing independent research and independent testing. Now, where are we at the moment? I think the good news is that we again have a conversation about joining lots of parts of that industry up, and certainly the Fire Sector Federation, I think, is starting to do some great work in terms of what is there in the fire sector, who's doing what are those conversations about. Let's firstly pull all this together. Let's join it up and make sure we haven't got any duplication, make sure we're all agreed in the direction of travel around the general conversation of fire. And I think that work will really help us as we get into this autumn in terms of understanding all the various players and what they're doing. That then links back with what I was just saying earlier about the conversation with insurance and the work that insurance companies have independently done, and we can join that up into that conversation, and it already is actually. So that's really helpful. Then we have got again going back to Paul Morell's report, the analysis that he's clearly shown that government needs to address in this situation, and we've got a few challenges ahead. And as far as I'm concerned, top of my list is what happens to BS 476. And where government might go with that. We have clearly identified to them that any change with that standard, whilst everybody wants to progress and maybe move to more modern principles, any change has to be done very carefully with the clear understanding of industry, and it has to be done gently, so that we don't actually create any real problems in the marketplace. There are others within that space, as other changes within that space that I think we need to again work closely with government to make sure we've got decent transition periods. And I think the important thing overall is we still haven't got a clear direction of travel on a number of the key issues that came out of Judith Hackett's report. There is still, I left a call this morning where there was conversation around, okay, so are we building high-rise residential with 2 staircases? Does the principle of stay put still stand? And you know that there are a whole load of other equally important topics around that. There's lots to be defined and resolved in this space, so that industry has a clear way forward. On the horizon, I also note that there are new fire definition standards that the EU are proposing and will be written into harmonised standards, I think, from next year. So that's another challenge for us. Do we take them on board or do we ignore them? I think most of industry would say we can't possibly ignore them. So there's another whole front of things to be dealing with. So I think there is some reason for mild celebration, because we're starting to have one conversation joined up. But I think there is a lot of complexity and a lot of things that trouble everybody that need answers. And the only way I think we can do that is by making sure that we can coalesce around one conversation as industry, and we can take that one conversation to the relevant government departments. And when you think about fire, for me, there are 5 separate government departments, and quite often they don't talk to each other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yes. Okay, Steve, I'm going to ask you a question, just something that I think sometimes is quite a common misunderstanding about what CCPI is or does cover, and that's maybe just I often hear people saying, "Oh, you can't do that because of CCPI," and I'm thinking, well, that's not actually strictly true. Is that something that you're coming across in terms of, the reality is that I think people expect that CCPI have actually validated the data that you're checking, which of course we know that's not what's happening. But is that something that you're getting questioned, and is that something that we all need to maybe just be a bit clearer about? Because my fear is, as CCPI is getting more traction, there are a number of people that are misinterpreting what they think it is, which could be a problem for all of us.
It's an interesting one. I tend to hopefully address that throughout the onboarding process with all the suppliers that we're working with there, Nigel, because it hopefully makes the process easier, because I've certainly had a lot of experience with suppliers who think it's going to be too much of a mountain to climb as they confuse the process that we take with something like ISO 9001, which it isn't. This is very specifically about product information, and we're looking to very clearly, we hope, put our lens of clarity, accuracy, unambiguity, accessibility, and recency on the way in which that product information is presented. And we are looking to corroborate evidence that supports performance claims being made. And that is pretty clear as a message. And on all of the codes we now list and our publications, we have a QR code that takes you to somewhere that very explicitly points that out there. But yeah, it is very important, and it's glad you raised it there. And I shall just highlight this. This is about the product information being presented in such a way that it can be relied upon. We're not doing the testing piece or all of the other bits that you have to do to get your products on the market to meet whatever legislation is relevant to them. This is very specifically ensuring that whatever you're saying about it has had a third party set of eyes on it, and they are comfortable that can be corroborated. It does extend, yes, into the way in which marketing is generally then perceived throughout your organisation, and marketing teams are always the biggest challenge in any organisation as part of this process, as they're very keen to concatenate product information and make it a nice social post and flower it up. And in many cases, we've had discussions with people who really are at a loss as to how to market a product if it has to be accurate, which is telling in itself. But this is very much about accuracy, clarity, recency, unambiguity, and our 5 tenets there hopefully are pretty clear around product information itself, Nigel, and not going further in detail on that.
And to be clear, it wasn't a criticism, and I know that you do that for the onboarders, etc. I'm thinking about the people that are using it and what they expect. So I would reasonably expect an architect to come to us and say, "Great, Nigel, you've got your CCPI for that," and they will assume that often that it's more than it is, I think is what I'm saying. Now, yeah, we know that you mentioned there that a big part of it was having third party, which does a lot of the grunt work. But then equally, you know, we had a conversation not so very long ago where there are scenarios where you don't have third party, and what happens then? Because it doesn't mean that you can't get CCPI. It just means you have to be very accurate about what you are saying.
We're back to the confidence piece. I think again, Nigel, aren't we, over how information is presented when it carries a CCPI assessment mark is hopefully being now perceived as being having an extra element of trustworthiness. That's an appropriate way to put it. And as I say, it is translating into specifications now, which is great to see, because it gives that extra, much more ring of confidence piece that somebody choosing that product knows that they can believe what they're reading. And that hasn't always been the case for construction products, unfortunately. So hopefully, but taking your point on board as somebody who would pull me apart on these sort of things, I clearly need to do more work on getting that message across there, Nigel. So we will endeavour to do so, following your recommendation.
Okay. Thank you. Well, and one bit just for the audience, something I shared with Peter and Steve was the fact that we had an example recently where you have to not only be careful with your marketeers, but also the people they use. So we had case in point where we had a piece of PR that went out into press, and the headline was something that, well, we were horrified to see what they'd written. And of course, it was pointed out, how would Bauder say that? We hadn't said it. The editor of the magazine had said it. So it's something else that we have to broaden our scope to people that could buy in. We need to get the editors and the magazines, etc., into that. So beware. So okay, so another topic which we've gone a reasonable period without me talking about, and this is one that for Peter, and he's used to answering this. We've got an election and it's nearing the end, and so therefore not a lot has happened. But it's the dreaded UKCA and what your feeling is. So I know at the minute nothing's going to happen until we have a new government, and that might take some time. But I think most of us are weary of it, and we would gladly like not to have it and go with just the good old CE mark and DOP. Any insights, any further comments on that?
So yeah, thanks, Nigel. Yeah, I really enjoy talking about this. We have just, for point of fact, we have just passed the 3-year mark where we have been trying to get a resolution on CA marking for construction products, which is pretty dreadful when you think about it, and the weight and cost and waste that it's created for industry. So where we are, the latest is that I anticipate as soon as the new Secretary of State at Department of Levelling Up is announced, and as soon as the team have briefed him in terms of the progress of the work that they've done, I think the team there, led by Louise Barr, are pretty close actually to sending out a document setting out their suggestions, because I do believe that they are in certainly before the election anyway, in a mood to consult on how this goes forward. I think we have also been keen to push at the point that you've just made. Industry can do without this, and certainly, as far as I'm concerned, if we get the government we think we're going to get, which will be focused on growth and growing the economy, the major point that we will want to make, if you want to do that in construction, you will ditch this ridiculous idea of a CA mark. And there's a number of other lead weights, as I call them, that are hanging around the neck of construction that they could get rid of, and we could start to actually grow the construction sector. We are making this point on a regular basis. I've got a meeting with the directors at the Department of Levelling Up straight after the election. Out of the CLC group, where we've been coming up with the recommendations that industry wants from the Paul Morrell report. We've got 12 key issues that we've distilled out of a huge amount of work that the group has done, and we'll be putting those on the table and pushing them forward with the Department of Levelling Up, although I'm not sure how long that name will stay after the election, but we'll see. So The answer is, I remain, I don't know why, but I remain optimistic for a solution. But what we will desperately demand is a solution that's right for industry.
Because as we know, there's many people that still think it's a quality mark, which just shows us to how ill-informed they are. But and so I suppose the key question for a lot of the people on the call is, we've got, I suppose, a looming deadline of a year's time, or just less than a year's time now. And is it likely that we're going to have to do something before then? Because there's lots of people that will not do anything until they get clear sight.
Well, I think it's increasingly less likely. The point is that as it stands, it's a policy position and nothing more. And in order for the CA mark to go ahead, then legislation is required. Now we've closely questioned the officials on this. They tell us that that legislation could go through Parliament, if there was time and space, of course, within about 6 months. So that puts a drop dead on this at the turn of the year. But nonetheless, we've been saying, as I think I alluded to just now, this is a dead weight around productivity, and we need to get rid of the uncertainty as fast as we possibly can. It took government maybe about a year to recognise that position, but they've got themselves in a bit of a fix in terms of knowing really what the solution is, without retreating from a lot of the policy positions. But of course, a new government, new administration gives everybody the opportunity to withdraw from those points without the political embarrassment. And I really hope that they will take the opportunity to do that, because that's what industry needs.
I think there was a uniform here from the audience there, although I didn't hear it. So okay, so interesting bit was that when we were together last, I was sitting on the stage next to Duncan from OPSS, and afterwards we were talking about this point we've just been talking about, and he was saying, well, of course, my department, the main thing that we're doing is there to ensure that at the minute, the current CE marking, where relevant, is followed. And I was saying, yes, but there's a real disconnect there, because actually in the declaration of performance, many of the items don't have to be declared. There's only some key ones. And those key ones aren't necessarily the killer ones that are going to be really important. And he sort of looked so dejected, because I was basically saying you're wasting your time in certain sectors, of course, and maybe I can only speak for our own. But he was very keen to keep coming back at me for further questions on it, because he was saying, well, it just demonstrates again as to how this is all so disconnected. Because he said, my department is doing this. You're telling me that we're wasting their time in the politest way. And I said, well, yes, and especially with the UKCA mark. And it was something that I don't think he'd thought about.
No, if I could just jump in, Nigel, I think with the greatest respect, I think the issue is that the OPSS are developing their capability and capacity, and that is still going on. So that they've grown the team over the last year considerably. And Duncan's in charge, and so therefore I wouldn't expect him necessarily to know every little bit of the nuances that probably a lot of us do. And I think we do really benefit, though, from a regulator who wants to engage with industry, who wants to understand our problems. So we have got quite a lot of different conversations going on with Duncan's team. And frankly, I think there is still quite a bit of learning to do there, but they are quite happy. They're up for the challenge, and I think we will see post-election, as long as the new government doesn't change anything too dramatically, we're going to see a lot of OPSS industry events and calls like this one to just tease out some of that fundamental detail. So whilst, it might be slightly concerning that we haven't got quite the level of understanding we would want, we have got an open dialogue and good communications. So I'd be quite optimistic about that.
Okay, good. Good. So I had a meeting with one of the owners of our business only last evening, who was asking me a number of questions. And I said, can we pause this conversation for the middle of September onwards, at which point things will become a lot more clearer, because clearly his questions were about what was happening there. Steve, I have, you mentioned earlier on, and I meant to come back to it, about the new facility on the marks for CCPI, that we now have the QR code, and it may be worth explaining as to what the benefit and what that does. You know, it's one of the things I've been lobbying for quite a while. So do you want to explain that a bit further for everybody?
Yeah, it hopefully makes it much simpler. It was added, as you say, from feedback we've had from a number of organisations that have gone through, that whilst we're still early days in general understanding of what the assessment mark actually means, now that it's starting to become more visible in many scenarios, how does anybody know what it means, such that they can get to the detail behind it when it's on a web page or on a page of a catalogue or wherever it might be presented, such that they can follow it through and get to exactly where they understand what it means. So we introduced a very simple. We've got lots of online development to still do yet as funds allow. But on each individual mark now, you can just do the usual scanning of the QR code, and it'll take you to a page on our website which very succinctly explains exactly what the code means, and what level of understanding, hopefully, it should be portraying to the user in relation to that product, to enable them to make the choice, an appropriate choice of product, if you like, and understand what it means. So very simple and hopefully straightforward.
Okay, and one assumes that the next stage from that, and I heard what you're saying is subject to funds, and I know obviously there's a small number of you, so there's only so much you can do, is I think one of the key things that's relevant to this audience is there are quite a number of system marks there, perhaps a higher number of them than many other sectors. And that's one of the bits where it is relevant to know what the content is. So just as it is, you might look at a BBA certificate, unless you know what the scope of the BBA certificate, I won't say it's meaningless, but and it's a very similar thing here for CCPI. If you have a system, you need to know what's included in the system. So that would be a vehicle to get there as well, one would expect.
It is absolutely, and as I say, that the QR code linking from a system does explain what that means. And we also do spend some time with every organisation who is using a system as an assessment mark to just make it clear where it can be used, so that it doesn't get confused with it relating to a particular product. And anybody that wants more detail on that, either reach out or through our website or through yourself, and I would be more than happy to work through that with anybody on the call.
Great, thank you. Well, our time is up, and basically, I think there is a good argument that we should be rearranging another of these meetings for the same reason I told Mr. Bauder, is the fact that in maybe shorter period than a year's time, because I think there's a lot going to happen, and a number of these topics we're talking about are going to actually tease forward a lot further. And these are all the things that everybody wants to know about to react to. So I would like to thank Steve. Thank you very much for your input, and keep up the good work. And Peter, as ever, thank you for your knowledge and wisdom in this area, and keep it up. And I'm sure that both of you may be receiving invites for future meetings, because it's a good way for us to be able to keep our industry informed. And the beauty of recording it is that everybody's on the call. You can share it with those that haven't been able to join us this morning. So handing back to Ronan. Thank you.
Nigel, thank you. Excellent hosting as always. And also a huge thanks to Peter and Steve for taking the time this morning to be with us here and providing such clear responses. The discussion was excellent and covered key issues facing our industry. So thank you all for that panel. Again, the support of SPRA event partners is very much appreciated. And of course, thanks to all of you for attending or joining today's panel discussion. I'm sure and hope you found it enjoyable and informative. We look forward to hosting future SPRA events, so please keep a lookout for these through our website and weekly updates coming into your mailbox, and of course through social media. So that ends today's event, and we at SPRA wish you well for the rest of the week. A big thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks all.